Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Two Excel spreadsheets are going around. One is the attendance sheet. It's been updated as of this morning, so if anybody's name is not on the attendance sheet, let me know because it should be there. As I said, I just downloaded it this morning. And this is the presentation sheet. Let's see, Ian, are you here? Okay. So I just saw two names in your email. Do you have another team member or just two of you?
We'll find the third, but we'll find nobody else.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to make sure I was correct that I only saw two. Okay. So there's room still on team one to do that first chapter. And then, of course, all the others are open at this moment. Hopefully you've had a chance to maybe talk to your friends and see who you'd like to have in a team. There are 9 chapters out of the College Success book that we'll have you present, and there's on the current list 29 members in the class. Obviously 9 times 3 is 27, so 2 teams can have 4 people. I didn't make a column for 4 people, but I did add a 4th column for remarks. So basically, once you see that there are, in fact, I really would prefer to fill up the 27 spots before we put in any 4th spots to make sure we have full teams on the 9 chapters, that we have 3 people on each team. So if you're wanting to have a 4-person team, either ask my permission or wait until all the other slots are filled up. I'm not sure how many people we have here today. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. So we don't have anywhere close enough here today to fill up all the slots. So I would hesitate to fill out that, to add a 4th person yet. So let's fill up 3 spots. If we, maybe some more people will join us today, and we'll be able to fill those up. But some people, even though they sign up for the class, just don't show up for whatever reason, and then later on they end up withdrawing. So let's fill up the 3 team slots before we add any 4th one at this point. If later on we get it filled up, we have the rest of the people show up, you can change. If you really want to be on a team with 3 friends, you can change. You can get me to authorize you to change at that point. But at this moment, I want to fill up the 27 spots in the 3 columns. Any questions on that? Again, the book is in Moodle, so you have access to the entire textbook in Moodle. If you in case you haven't figured this out, let me just go to Moodle real quick. I'm just recording a small part of it, but it should be adequate. So going to Moodle. So if you go into your Moodle site here, right at the top, first off, we have an abridged version of the 7 habits. I've decided not to actually make any reading assignments from it, but you may find it helpful to go in and look at it when you're trying to answer questions or whatever. It will give you more detail. Instead, I'm going to have you watch videos and let you listen to mostly to Stephen Covey himself, related to that book. College Success is right here next to it. I've left it as a Word document, which means you could easily copy out graphics and stuff because it's in Word. So you'll actually, when you click that, it'll download automatically. Rather than open, it'll download. And so you'll have access to the words and the graphics to easily help make your PowerPoints with. There are a couple of other items here that we may or may not get to, but I've put them in case I want to refer to them. So anyway, they're right at the top, along with our syllabus, which I update occasionally. So if you have any questions, about what we're doing, that's a good place to start right there. But anytime you need to talk to me, feel free to do it, but make sure that it's not already answered in the syllabus. Let me put it that way. Okay, any questions on any of that? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and go to our, in fact, this week, I was just mentioning before, I'm going to have you watch more videos of Covey. We'll watch some in class, but this one is a longer one. This is about an hour and a half long, and this will be your only homework assignment for this week, other than there'll be a short quiz, and there'll be your writing. But as far as watching videos and stuff, it'll just be this one video because it's a little bit longer. It overlaps a little bit with what we'll be talking about in class, but it reinforces it. And frankly, he's a better teacher than I am, and so since he wrote the book, he knows it better than I do. And you can look at the closed caption. So when you go into this, then let me just again, just in case you don't know, I guess I just copy it out. Okay, let me go there. So this will be embedded into Moodle, but you can also, from there, go to the YouTube site itself. And just to make sure you know, you understand what you're able to do, let me show it again, if I didn't already.
You get a better and better paradigm.
Okay, so here you have the CC. Sometimes they have a new symbol there for some of the videos, but it's in the same location. And of course you can then turn on the closed caption. So when you're watching it, you can...
The 7 habits of highly effective people.
Now, the closed captions are being done electronically. They're being done by software, and so be careful not to depend on it too much, in the sense that there will be some wrong words in it. It will hear Dr. Covey or me. If you're the same thing, the closed captions will also be developed in my videos. So you've got to go back to my videos, and it may not be in one day. Sometimes it's a couple of days before it creates the closed captions. Or it may not be a matter of days. It may be that it takes somebody to ask for it, and then it develops it or something. I'm not sure exactly how it's set up, but anyway, you can also listen to my lectures and look at closed captions on YouTube in case you need that. But then also, once you have that, again, YouTube is apparently in a transition period, so sometimes some of this stuff is down here instead of up here. But you'll see 3 dots, and typically that is where you want to go in order to see the entire transcript. So now you can open up the transcript, and sometimes it appears underneath, sometimes to the right, but it should someplace in a second give us the entire transcript. So it doesn't only make the closed caption available, but now someplace, okay, up here in this one, in the newer version, it's up to the right, and the older version, it's underneath. So again, they're in a matter of transition. So here, you can go ahead, and if you wanted to, you could actually copy the whole thing. So let me get my mug out of the way. So let's say you wanted to copy the whole thing. The easiest way to, in something this long, is to click, well, typically, it's not going to let you click. I guess this one you're just going to have to, come down and just come down. But it will, if you push down toward the bottom, it will zoom up and let you copy it all. And so, like I say, this is a long video, so it's going to be copying a lot of words. But if you wanted those words someplace, if you wanted to be able to read those and maybe put them into a translator or something like that, you can do that. Copy them out. Like I say, be careful. Some of the words are not correct because it's trying to hear them and make words out of them. And so it mishears them sometimes, so to speak. So anyway, you can copy it all and hit a Control-C on your keyboard, or right-click copy, Control-C in your keyboard is the same thing, and then paste it into a Word document or whatever and do whatever you need to do to it. So if you don't know this exists on YouTube, it's good for you to know that. You also have the same thing if I use a TED.com. It also has both closed caption, and actually a lot of TED.com has immediate translation. You can look, you have closed caption and translation at the same time. And it also makes the transcript available and most of the TED.com videos that are available. So in case that's helpful to you. Okay, so that would be the one video that you'll watch. It looks like it's more like 100 minutes, 1 hour and 40 minutes. Probably if you don't get done with it totally this week, it won't matter too much. But you want to go ahead and go through this. This is a pretty good overview of Covey. It's not, especially over this first part. So again, that's homework. If you don't get it all done this week, plan to get it done as soon as you can anyway. Okay, so I'm going to go back and start some discussion on this today, and we will. By the way, when you do presentations, on what I'm seeing is it's showing me my current slide, and it's showing me to the right of it in small format the next slide, and then I'm putting my video underneath the second slide. But there's also in the second slide a place where it'll show you your notes. So if you want to have some notes for your presentation, if you type them into the note section of PowerPoint, which is automatically there underneath the graphic portion, it will show up in this. Anyway, the way that it presents it here, it shows only a slide there, but on the computer, by the way, you need to use my computer because we're recording it, video recording it. So just bring your PowerPoint on a USB, stick it in here, open up on my computer so that we can keep a video record of it, and everybody else can watch not only my lectures, but your lectures as well. So anyway, on the version that I see here, I can't turn around because I have too many cables set up. But like I said, it has a big copy of the current video, a small one of the next one, and then for me, I put my video underneath it where the notes would otherwise go. But I can also put it on top of the next slide as well, and you can see your notes if you want to put some notes. In addition to what you see on your PowerPoint slide, you can see some additional notes at the same time with the way that it works here in the computer. So I'm going to adjust this a little bit for my recording purposes, and that should be okay. Okay, so we're still obviously in the next 7 weeks or so, we'll continue in the primary textbook, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Next week, we will have the presentation by Team 1, and that I forget exactly what I wrote down. I would expect it to be around 30 minutes, something like that. I don't want to take up the entire class. We only have a 2-hour class every week, and so the college success, just get the main points out of it, because in some cases you have 50 pages or so to cover. In 30 minutes you can't cover all of 50 pages, and so your assignment is to ignore some of it. Okay, find the best stuff. You should read all of your chapter, or at least go through it quite thoroughly. If not every word for word, go through it quite thoroughly and decide what is most important to present to the class, and create your PowerPoint accordingly, and your script, if you might want to call it a script. I will tell you this, is that I reward people who do not use a script. And so while you might think you want to be word perfect and be perfect, you can't. You have to be a professional actor or actress to do a good job of expressing yourself, of keeping eye contact, of giving emphasis to key parts, and read it. And I presume none of you are professional actors or actresses. And so one of the, there's 4 parts of the grading. One is the PowerPoint, and that is rewarded for not having too much information on each slide. You want to have just the key points, so it's an outline. It's not a script either. So you want to have key points, usually in bullet items. You want to have graphics to help emphasize the key point that you're making. And anyway, you want to clear. One thing you don't want to do is have so many words that people are having to decide, do I read or do I listen? If you have too many words in a slide, that is in essence the decision you're trying to make them make. And in essence, and usually they're bad at both. Because there's so many words they're trying to read, but you're talking, so they're trying to listen, and they're trying to read, and they're trying to talk, and they're going back and forth, and they get less than if you had nothing on it. And so not too many words in every slide. There are some cases where I may put more words on it so that you have reference to it later. But in my case, definitely, listen to me. If I put too many words on, ignore the PowerPoint. It's there for you to refer to later. But typically, I'm trying to keep as few words on a slide as I can so that you can get the main idea that's on the slide, but you can listen to me and not have to decide which one to do. You can't do both at the same time very well, listen and look and read. So likewise, don't put too many words in your slides. That means that in some cases, and some of my students are figuring this out, and that's good. I've noticed some of my presentations in my other classes. One of the teams in my history class had like 80 slides. That's okay. Because that means they had very few words in each slide. And so that's what I try to do too, is I try to break slides into have more slides and fewer words in each slide. And so and it guides me through the presentation a little bit easier by having more slides and does not create that conflict, read or listen conflict. So for the PowerPoint portion, that's what I encourage you to do. Find good graphics, put few words, and cover the subjects well. The second part is just overall content. And when I say content, that does not mean that you're going to be rewarded for covering everything in the chapter. No. In fact, if you read the criteria, it says that I expect you to leave stuff out, and that's what I do. I will not be checking, did they cover everything? Now, if it's something obvious that that I think is really important and you decide is not important, and I think you made a big mistake, that would affect you. But I'm not going to be that picky on that. I am going to depend on you largely to decide what is important to me and my classmates. So it's rare when I penalize anybody for making a bad choice of content. It's pretty rare. I might penalize them in that area for not giving good illustrations and not explaining things well. That becomes content. So if, for example, in the history class, we're using one of the textbooks we're using in the history class is very complex, very scientific, and it's evaluating all the media according to 9, I think it is 9 attributes. Well, you can't leave out any of the attributes, and you have to explain them well, and so they require some illustrations, some examples to explain them because they're kind of complicated. Well, for a team that doesn't explain those attributes well, and this is the key to the entire textbook that they were presenting from chapter 1, that got some discount. They didn't cover that part well enough. So that was something. That's one of the few times I think I've ever penalized anybody for not choosing the correct content or covering it well enough. And that was really the bigger deal. And maybe I do more often penalize for just not explaining things well. If you include a concept, in other words, a vocabulary word, so to speak, that is not commonly known or is being used in a different way than is commonly used, then you need to explain it. I may have said in this class, but it is embedded into the critique sheet. Again, there's 4 things to do to make sure people understand a new concept: definition, illustration, compare, and contrast. So what's the dictionary say it is, basically, or the textbook? Illustrate it either visually or, again, an in-depth example. An example is a type of illustration, verbal illustration. Compare, what is it like? Contrast, what is it different than? Now, not every concept you cover will you need to do all 4. Some are more complex than others or deserve more time to be to cover them. In that case, if they deserve more time, then I would expect all 4 to occur: define, illustrate, compare, and contrast. But the main thing is when I start really deducting is when they define and they give no illustration at all, and the definition is not clear, and they throw it into their PowerPoint because they want to be complete. They want to cover everything in their chapter, but all they've given us is a very bare definition without people understanding what it really meant. And that's where they need they need illustration at that point. And so cover what you're going to cover well. Don't just define, but illustrate anything you're going to use. Otherwise, don't even talk about it. If you're not going to explain it well, don't even mention it, because a badly treated topic, a badly treated concept, is what's going to attract my attention. Boy, they didn't do that well. If you don't include it at all, I won't even notice probably. But if you include it and then don't do a good job of it, I will notice that. So in the content, the key is whatever you do, cover it well so that I don't think that you left us hanging, that you just threw in some words and you didn't explain it well enough. Under the third one is presentation. And that's where I start talking about, do you have eye contact? Do you emphasize things? Do you have some energy and enthusiasm for what you're talking about? So look at those sorts of things. So that's the sort of stuff that is very difficult to do if you're reading a script. And so you might write a script, and then you can even maybe put down the main points if they're not already in the PowerPoint, basically your outline of your script to remind you what you wanted to say. You could put them on cards or something and hold them in your hand and look at them. That's fine too. Or like I say, from what you're seeing here, you not only see the PowerPoint, but you have an area for notes. It's not a big area, but it could include maybe 20 words, additional words or something as notes to yourself. So try to speak without reading it. That means maybe a little more practice, and it also means you won't be word perfect. And I will reward you more for not using a script and for being able to give some emphasis and some and enthusiasm and eye contact. I'll reward you more for that than I'll penalize you for being imperfect in your presentation, stumbling a little bit, for example. It's more valuable to you in the way I grade that you keep eye contact. So try to do that. That said, I don't usually grade real hard in the presentations, so probably pretty much I think the worst grade I've ever given is maybe a B on a presentation. There might be some exception in history where I gave less than a B because somebody just totally screwed it up, but I don't recall the time when I did. So I don't grade real hard. So if you make a really good effort, you can expect to be at least a B and probably a little bit higher than that. I make it a little bit harder to get an A. A minus is easier, obviously, but so I hold kind of, I want you to see a really do a good job all the way through to get a regular straight A. The fourth part, by the way, is kind of a miscellaneous part. and that includes, did you create questions? You're supposed to create some questions. Each team member, 2 or 3 questions. I can't remember exactly what it says, but 2 or 3 questions. So your team should have somewhere 8 or 9 questions altogether, maybe. And those questions, that's good for you to create the question, because then I can use them in the quizzes, and you already know the answers, right? If you create your own questions. So it's good for your team to create good questions. I want them to be multiple choice questions. I might turn them into something else, but I want you to make them multiple choice questions. That's the normal, that most of my questions and quizzes will be multiple choice. So that's what I want you to make. Yeah. And you can kind of look at the questions I put on Moodle and kind of get an idea of how to phrase questions. Sometimes I do it in reverse, so I say which of the following is not whatever. And so everything's a correct answer, and there's one that's an incorrect answer. That's sometimes easier than saying which of the following is true, because making up false answers is harder than putting in true answers. And so phrasing it the way I frequently phrase it, which of the following is not true, is sometimes actually easier. So that's, look at the quizzes on the internet, on the Moodle site, and it'll give you some idea of how I do it. Any questions on any of that? The other part on that fourth miscellaneous section is, were you ready on time? Did you give me a copy of your PowerPoint so I could take notes on it? Did you give me the electronic copy so I could put it on Moodle? Some of those little things like that. If it's valuable, if you think you need it, although with 30 minutes, I think the content you have in the chapter will be plenty, but if there's for some reason you want to draw something from an outside source, for example, not maybe as relevant in this case, but possibly there might be a situation in this book, since it was published in America, that there's content that is not really appropriate for China, Malaysia sort of culture, or their historical background, their educational system, whatever. There might be a place where you might want to customize it and localize it, you might say, make it more relevant to what you're doing, and leave the content of the textbook a little bit in order to localize it, make it more relevant. So, if you do that and it's clear that, gee, that helped it, then that might get you a little bit extra credit. But in this case, I don't think this subject is probably going to need that. History classes and stuff like that are more likely to provide that opportunity to localize and enhance the content with outside sources. But if you can improve the content by localizing it a little bit, then you would be rewarded for that extra effort if it's clearly useful. Okay, let's go on. Again, any questions about that assignment? So we're going to go week by week. There'll be one presentation a week. And so Team 1 will do next week, and then next week there'll be Team 2, and the next week Team 3, and next week Team 4, and so forth. So that gives you some idea of when you'd be coming up, would be in order. We skip, as you notice, we skip 3 chapters in the book. So we go from 8 to 12. So 9, 10, 11 are not included because I don't consider them particularly relevant myself. So I've just excluded the entire chapters. Okay. Okay. So we went through this before. This is a graphic summary of what we learn in this book. The one that's circled there is one we're going to talk about today. Habit 1, to be proactive. Many times we develop a self-image, I think maybe just week 1, And so how many of you were here in week one, by the way? Anybody here? Okay, a couple of you. Okay, not many of you were here in week one. So I might actually refer to some content we have in week one, even today, and including right now. I mentioned that I had two friends. One was the straight A student, and one was the straight D student, basically. But the straight D student ultimately became a college instructor of mechanics. Yes, not of political science or something, but of mechanics. He became a college instructor. The straight A student became a counselor at a prison. And so what I brought up in week one was, which one's more successful? I think they're both equally successful. But the one I admire more is the one who got all D's. He was not a good student in the traditional sense. He did not, maybe some of it was lacking effort, lacking interest, lacking relevance. And so he, didn't memorize a lot of stuff. He didn't care that much about algebra and geometry and classes he had to take that were not things of interest to him. He wasn't a very good writer, and so that brought down a lot of his scores. He wasn't a very good reader. That brought down his scores. So he was pretty much socially promoted. Just the teachers, let's get rid of him. We'll give him a D and get him out of here. And so all of his life, in his 12 years of public education in America, he was pretty much told, "You're an idiot." Every teacher, "You're an idiot. You're an idiot. You're an idiot." And for him to, find his niche in life, his love, to then be able to pursue once he got out of the public school, pursue his passion, which was mechanics, and become so good at it, he became a college instructor. I really admire him for that, more than my smart friend, although I admire my smart friend for not doing something, for finding a career that to him was meaningful and of service to mankind, helping people who were in prison to get out and start and have a better life and a legal life. So I admire him too, don't get me wrong, I admire him a lot. But the very fact that this social mirror, a lot of our self-image is from how other people treat us. And Dr. Covey brings up, what if the only mirror you ever had in life was one of those crazy mirrors in some of these theme parks that makes you look fat, or you look tall and skinny, or make you look weird in some way? Have you ever seen know what I'm talking about? Have you seen a mirror like that? I'm not sure how common they are around here, but anyway, certain theme parks have those sorts of mirrors that make you look strange. It's your image, but it's not the true image of you. It makes you look weird in some way. And what if that were the only image you ever saw of yourself? What would you think of yourself? You would have a very distorted idea of what you look like all of your life. You would think, gee, I look weird. And yet that's not you. A good mirror gives you a pretty good idea of what you look like. It's not perfect either, by the way, but it gives you some idea of what you look like. But if all you had was one of these crazy mirrors, you would have, it would be very difficult to have a good self-image. Because you'd look at that crazy mirror, and that's the only thing you saw. You say, wow, that is one weird-looking person. Why don't I look as good as other people? Because you got to see them directly, and you only see yourself in the crazy mirror. Well, in a sense, that's what happens to us that's our social mirror. And so that's why I admire my friend Dennis. His social mirror said, "You're an idiot." Over and over and over again for 12 years, "You're an idiot." And somehow he overcame that and became a college instructor. I don't know how he survived it. It's hard for me to even fathom how he survived that. But he did, which makes me, and so his social mirror was in reality a distortion of him. Because one problem with education is that we don't reward all kinds of intelligence. I think I told you before that a researcher at Harvard thinks there's something between 8 and 13 different types of intelligence. And many of them are not rewarded at all in school. Mechanical intelligence, for example, my friend Dennis had great mechanical intelligence. How often is that rewarded in school? Almost, unless you have a special class or something, never. My brother was pretty much a C student and dropped out of the university. He's now a millionaire, multimillionaire, because he had an intelligence that was not only not rewarded, but was punished in school. His intelligence was social intelligence. And so he was an excellent salesperson, an excellent manager of people. And so he is very wealthy because he had social intelligence that in school was punished. Not rewarded at all, but punished in school because he wanted to talk to people and make jokes and stuff like that. Well, how many teachers do you know that like that sort of a student? Almost none, right? And so our social mirror sometimes is a bad reflection of who we really are. And that can even have, I guess this is a good place to put it in. Dr. Covey refers to something that happened in England many years ago. And this is a true story, is that they had a class and they took a test. And the results of the test, it said these students here are kind of dumb, these students here are smart. And lo and behold, and so they went on for several weeks, and the students, lived up to what the test said they would. And then the testing company let them know, oops, we reversed that. Sorry, the kids we said that were really bright, they're kind of dumb. And these ones we said were dumb, they're actually your smart students. And as soon as they knew that, the roles reversed. The social mirror somehow affected those students in such a way, and perhaps affected the way teachers, they expected these students to do well, and they expected these students to do poorly. Maybe their grading was a little bit biased by that. But even in a nationalized test, suddenly, bam, they reversed. And the only difference was whether this test made them think that they were stupid or smart, and made the teachers think they were stupid or smart. The only thing that changed, same students. So the social mirror can have a huge impact on us. And it's important to understand that we are more than our social mirror. Next subject, but we'll kind of tie them together later. We also have kind of social maps developed by psychiatrists and people of that ilk. And they discuss, well, what makes people like they are? What makes them strange or, passionate or enthusiastic or whatever? What makes people the way they are? And some of them say it's genetic, and so they basically blame your grandparents. It's your DNA. Some of them think it's kind of the way you're raised in especially your really early childhood, so they blame your parents. And some of them go beyond that and say, well, it's your overall environment, so economics, your social environment. Did you grow up in the slums? Did you grow up in the nice neighborhood? What advantage did you have? That determines who you become. And so, those are very popular ideas of psychiatrists and sociologists. Dr. Covey, this is kind of makes fun of that. Do you know where I'm residing? Board City, that's where. But not for long. With a positive mental attitude, I can whip it. I think I'll make a lateral move. It's self-pity. Our attitude, our how we respond to life is what Dr. Covey really, that's perhaps his most important teaching, is that we are not the results of any of those things he was talking about, not ultimately. We're not the results of genetics. We're not the results of how we were raised as children. We're not the results of our environment. We're different. Somewhere between the stimulus and the things that happen to us is a freedom that humans have that other animals do not have. Any of you know the essence of the test of Pavlov and his dogs and animals, particularly dogs? You may read about that research, share with us. I mean, in essence, and there's been lots and lots of things that, with animals done similar to this, but in essence, every time he wanted to feed them, he would ring a bell, and they would respond to that bell. So even later on, when he didn't feed them, they would start salivating and so forth. They'd hear the bell. So it was the bell that became their stimulus. And so with animals who can't always think stuff through, they're not self-reflective like humans can be. They get trapped. They do get trapped by environment and so forth. They do not have the same capabilities as humans do to think about this. Okay, these people are ringing a bell, but the bell is not food. So you might respond if every time your parents wanted to feed you, they ring a bell, you might start salivating. But you kind of figured out after a while if they started screwing around with you with that and started ringing the bell and then not feeding you, and you'd realize, they're messing with me now. Well, dogs can't really. So they animals can be trained to do all sorts of amazing things. There was an experiment with mice or rats, I guess it was, that taught them how to play basketball. They gave them a little ball, and every time at first, if they just got close to the basket, they were given a piece of corn or something. And then as they got close, they had to touch the basket, and they gave them some food. And then they finally got them to where they'd put the ball in the basket before they got food. So they actually taught rats how to play basketball, in essence. And so you can do amazing things with animals by training them, but they can't train themselves. There's no dog that ever trained himself to whatever. He doesn't. The dogs don't train themselves. Humans train them. People can train themselves. For example, people can adopt 7 habits of highly effective people and work on those habits and make themselves better. That's something a dog can't do. He can't read a book and say, gee, I should be more proactive. What do I need to do to be more proactive? How do I put first things first here in my life? Dogs can't do that. Monkeys can't do that. Apes can't do that. Dolphins can't do that. None of the other animals in the world can do that. Only humans have that sort of ability to self-reflect and change themselves because they want to change themselves. They make the decision, I want to adopt the 7 habits. You've never met a dolphin that has done that. On the other hand, and that's also exemplified, this idea of stimulus and response, Viktor Frankl is an example that Dr. Covey uses in his book. Viktor Frankl was a psychiatrist, and in fact he was specifically a Freudian psychiatrist. So he believed in determinism and so forth. He believed basically people had no control over themselves. So he didn't believe what Dr. Covey is pointing out in his book. He thought pretty much you are what the environment, your parents, your genetics make you. You have no choice. You are what you are. And so that's what he believed. He was also an atheist, didn't believe in God. He had a very, he just basically thought of people like animals, pretty much. Well, he lived in Germany, and he was a professor and a psychiatrist, and he was a Jew. And he was one of those that he and his family were thrown into a concentration camp during World War II. His dad and his mother and his brother, all but one sister, were either died just like starvation or something, or they were killed in the gas ovens that the Nazis created to kill the Jews. And so, a lot of people would just basically, some of the people died for giving up hope. They just stopped eating. They just sat there and kind of almost comatose until they died. And Frankl also got pretty discouraged himself. I mean, imagine being under that situation where you didn't know whether you're going to be next, whether you're going to be going to the gas ovens next. He was beaten. He was, deprived of a lot of things that we consider normal. A lot of times he was just left naked, so you lose you can't be shy. I mean, everything they could take from him seemed like they took from him. His lifestyle, his opportunities to work, they were taking his health from him. They were taking his family away from him. The stimulus would say, you're going to be a pretty bitter person if you're going through this. You're going to be very bitter. You're going to be angry. You're going to be maybe a little, very depressed, maybe suicidal. You're not going to be in good shape psychologically. But Dr. Frankl, in looking at all this stuff, he was sitting there naked in his bunk one day, and he realized there was one thing that the Nazis could not take from him, and that was his self-awareness, his imagination, his humanity. And so first thing he did was he started imagining. He basically escaped from the prison, so to speak, in his mind. He would go out to the family cabin in the woods, and he would go to his classroom where he was teaching his students. He'd go to all of his favorite places in life in his mind and let him escape from the concentration camp in that way, mentally, which allowed him to not be as depressed. And then he started thinking about what else he might be able to do. And he became aware even of the fact that the guards were not there on their own will. The guards were ordered to be there. And so he actually became friends with some of the guards who were keeping him in prison and the other people in prison because they didn't want to be there either. He started basically a university within the concentration camp where smart people started teaching each other and helping each other to grow and their knowledge and understanding of things, so that if they ever did get out, they would be better, stronger people. And so he turned that concentration camp into as positive experience as you could possibly imagine under the circumstances. And when he left, his whole life was changed because he realized he was not the product of his environment. He was not the product of his genetics. He was not the product of his parental raising. He was somebody who could self-determine. He was the product of what he decided to make himself a product of. And so this is one of the key points of Dr. Covey's entire book, is that no matter our background, no matter our genetics, there are some things you can't do. I mean, there are some things genetically you can't control. He has, I'll get to in a second, but one of the videos that hopefully we'll have time to watch talks about the 90-10 rule. And his point is about 10% of your life you can't control. 90% you can. That you, through your self-determination, your imagination, your own will, can change 90% of your life. So what is proactivity? It is the ability to control one's environment rather than have it control you, as is often the case. Self-determination, choice, and power to decide your response to stimuli, conditions, and circumstances. So it is the opposite of reactivity, if you would. A proactive person takes responsibility for everything in his life. There may be some things he can't control, but those are things he doesn't worry about. The things he can't control, he can't worry about. But he can work around those things he can't control. The reactive person, because they believe that their fate is determined by other people and other things, other circumstances, they blame other people and circumstances for all of their obstacles and problems, their failures. They don't accept any responsibility for them. I'm a failure because of the teachers that treated me badly or whatever. So those are basically opposite terms, proactivity and reactivity. Animals, by definition, are reactive. They're not proactive. That's the difference. As I said, they can't think about, gee, what am I going to do here to better my life, or whatever. They don't have that thought process. They can't be self-reflective in that way. So the proactive model is something like this. You have the stimulus and you have the response. With animals, it goes straight there. Stimulus, response, ring the bell, start salivating, run to get your food. You've been trained to do that. Or whatever else. If you're the rat, I'm going to go put this ball in that basket and get some food. You get trained to do all sorts of amazing things, but it's a stimulus and response system. But with a human being, you're self-aware, you have imagination, you have a conscience, you have your independent will, and you can decide, after the stimulus, you can decide, I wonder how I want to respond to that. For good or bad, whatever, you get to decide. And blaming the stimulus doesn't do any good. Maybe you didn't control the stimulus. Maybe you had now frequently you had some responsibility for the stimulus as well, or the stimuli in plural. You did something that affected somebody else, and you are somewhat responsible even for the stimulus that you're responding to. Nonetheless, before you respond to that new stimulus, you can ponder that question. I wonder what my role was in this. Why did my boss yell at me? Did I deserve that? Is there anything that I've done that would justify what happened here? Now, if I get mad at my boss, if I walk out and quit, what will that do to my future? Should I respond in a more positive way? Should I act like it didn't happen? What should I do? These are all things that humans can think about, and they can plan their reaction accordingly, which dogs can't do, apes can't do, dolphins can't do. So again, the 90-10 rule, I think I'll go ahead and play that. See, where do I have that at? So I need to take us out of here. Any thoughts on that video? You understand? I mean, I think it's a good example of the 90-10 rule of how, he didn't control the coffee. That was going to happen. Things like that happen. We don't have control over. But the rest of the day was all his choice. The rest of the day was all his reaction to the reaction, 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 to the reaction. It kind of snowballed, as we say. So in dealing with such challenges in life and making, and self-determining our actions and future, we need to take the initiative. We have to make things happen. We have to sell the solution, sometimes to ourselves first, sometimes to people around us. We may, this may be a good place to bring in another story of Covey's. I tried to find it in the book, and I don't think it's in the book. I have some CDs and DVDs of his also, but I think this must have been in one of his DVDs, because at least I couldn't find it real quickly last night. But he gives an example someplace of, I'm sorry, I didn't turn this on. Hopefully you didn't miss too much of this. I'll turn on the microphone. He gives the example of a guy that he knew who was part of a company that was poorly run, poorly managed. It was pretty much managed by the top down by one executive who didn't trust anybody to do anything, and he made all the decisions. And sometimes his decisions were poor. And that has happened to me. I've seen those situations. Maybe you guys aren't old enough to have been in that situation, but some of you probably have, where you're part of some organization, maybe even a family, where somebody's making the decisions and not making good decisions. In a business, what frequently happens, and again, I can really relate to this, I think my very first job was like this, where first off, the top person was totally unethical, was doing stuff that was very harmful to the company, and would ultimately lead to the company being sold. That was the top person. Lack of ethics. The second person was the son of the owner, so even though he was kind of a betweener. He was a nice kid, very young, very inexperienced, very sure of himself because his dad was so successful. And some people think they automatically are going to be successful because their dad was successful, which doesn't always work out. But he was very sure of himself, and his dad sent him across the country to be the general manager of this newspaper. And in both cases, they were making bad decisions. Now, there are, in organizations like that, most people respond in a reactive way. And so they start gossiping in the office. They start saying, "Well, you see what the so-and-so did this time?" And they're always talking like if they have no part in the company's success, like if they totally kind of disown the company, they're just there, they're out looking for another job or whatever. They're just holding on. Get the money, keep the paycheck coming in, because we're going to get out of this loony bin as soon as we can, sort of reaction. And meanwhile, they talk to each other about the bad management of the company. But they rarely actually do anything about it. And so they're not proactive, they're reactive. Well, anyway, in this one company, it was that situation where they had a CEO who was not doing well. And the company, thus, was not doing well. And the executive had a poor, as I said, a very top-down management system, a very not a good people person. His employees did not particularly like him. He was somebody who would yell a lot and demand a lot. They didn't trust him. And he didn't trust them. And so, but there's a guy was in the business who was proactive. And so he was, and sometimes this person might get a bad reputation, but in this case, he handled it well. He would get his work done. He'd go, and he decided he was going to go in and see if he could help his boss. So rather than complain about his boss, he went in and offered to, "Is there anything I can do to help you? I'm done with my assignment. What can I do to help?" And at first, the boss didn't really quite trust him. There are, in America, we call them brown nosers, people who are just trying to score points. And they aren't really sincere. They're just they're manipulators. So they're people, they're maybe employing some of these other success books and success ideas of just, how to kiss up to the boss to get what you want, so to speak. And so the boss didn't quite trust him. But he continued to offer and continued to be friendly to the boss, even though the boss sometimes was rude to him, as well as other employees. And so pretty soon the boss did start saying, "Okay, well, yeah, you can do this and this," and he would start giving him some assignments, and he'd start doing them very well. And after a while, the executive became totally dependent on this guy. I mean, this guy was making things better. He was solving problems that the executive couldn't solve. And yet, and again, in that situation, in many cases, employees could see that person as being the brown noser, the manipulator. But he also tried to make things better for them. He realized there was a breakdown of trust between the executive and the employees. And so he would go to the employees and see what their problems were. What do you perceive as the problem in the company? And he would take some of those ideas back to the executive, and the executive now trusted him, so he had listened to him. He still wasn't a good people person. He still didn't trust the rest of the employees, but he trusted this one employee. And so this one employee became the interface, or the liaison between the executive and the other employees, and the company started doing really, really well. And the employees were happier, because now the boss actually realized this guy can handle the employees better than I can. So the executive let him be that interface, because he could see things were working out well. And the fate of the entire company changed because he wasn't the reactive employee. He was the proactive employee that decided he could help the company succeed. Despite the problems of the executive, despite the lack of trust between the executive and the employees, despite the bad attitude that had developed among the employees, that he could proactively change the fate of that company. And just one small step at a time, he did. He saved the company. Now, there's many situations in life like that. It's not just in our work, but in our family and other places too, where rather than taking the reactive perspective, we can choose to take the proactive. I had something similar. I had a contract with the state of Washington to put out a bilingual publication. I think I've mentioned that before, an English-Spanish publication about education, about the best practices of migrant and bilingual education. And I had one of my supervisors who was a German lady, very tough, and never smiled, hardly ever, never was friendly to anybody. And she oversaw all the contracts. I was under contract. I wasn't an employee. I was a contractor. And so her job was to oversee all the contracts. And basically all the contractors hated her. She had no friends, especially among the contractors, and not that many friends among her fellow workers either. But she was very smart. She did her job well. She managed the contract properly. So, she was not going to get fired. But she was not liked either. And so the first time, when I first got the contract, I submitted my work for review before my first publication, and she was very critical of my work. And I basically, in that case, I rebuffed her, and I said, no, look, I'm the professional that you hired to do this. Just let me do my job. And if you don't like it later, then you can fire me, whatever. But let me do my job. I'm the professional at putting out publications. And so she kind of backed off, and she did become somewhat supportive, very supportive of my work. She never said anything positive, but she never criticized after that either. Very, very rarely did she criticize, and she's being a very critical person. If I'd been doing something wrong, she would have certainly felt free to criticize. So her positive reaction was saying nothing, not being critical. And so, we went on for almost, I guess it was like 6 years of this sort of relationship, pretty much doing our own job and ignoring each other. And then one day I wrote a story that was critical of a university in our state for not working well with our migrant program. They had agreed to work with us on certain things, and then they failed to fulfill their end of the bargain, so to speak. And so I got some quotes. I did a good job of reporting. Everything I said was accurate. But so when I sent it out, my routine was to send it out to about 14 people to get their review, to get whether they caught any grammatical errors, spelling errors, factual errors, anything they had a complaint about, they were invited to give me a response. But in almost every week, they say, good job, good job, good job, good job, good job, good job, good job. Very positive responses. And so I wrote this story, and even her boss said, good job, all down the line, everybody said, good job, good job, good job, good job, good job, except her. And she said, Ken, you can't run this. You're going to cause bad relations with the university. You just can't run this. Now I was, okay, let's fight. I'm the professional here. I rebuffed you once. Yes, I'm going to take you on. Your boss said I was okay. We're ready to fight now. And so that was my attitude. My immediate response was that. And I wrote an angry email back to her. And then just before I hit the send button, I said, maybe I better sleep on this. And so I slept on it. Next morning I woke up and realized she's right. And so I wrote her an email saying, thank you. You are the only person who critically reviews my stories. Everybody else only gives me positive responses, and once in a while you tell me the truth. That this was a mistake. Despite all my hard work, I spent hours doing this story, but you're right. And just that, suddenly she became my best friend. She wrote letters recommending that they increase my contract. I have a letter of recommendation from her on my website. She was suddenly my best friend, telling me about her vacation in Europe. She needed somebody to talk to. I was flabbergasted at the response of just saying thank you for looking at my material critically, in a positive way, critically, but giving me important feedback. Suddenly, the fact that anybody said thank you to her ever in her whole career, I think, she was suddenly my best friend. I was flabbergasted at the response, but yes, it was her own fault that she had isolated herself. There's no question about that. Her attitude had isolated her and made it so she had no friends within the organization. And so just this little breath of fresh air of one person saying thank you for being critical changed our entire relationship after that. And I had no idea. I mean, like I said, it was such an amazing experience that it's hard to even express or describe how it changed overnight, over simply not reacting, but realizing, okay, let's take the proactive approach to this. What she said has some merit. This could get us into some arguments with the college. Who knows what could happen? So I better take her advice and thank her for it. And everything changed. I say after 6 years of working together, from just being kind of almost frenemies, I guess you could call it, kind of friendly enemies, more or less, suddenly we were best friends. I don't know how to explain it. So we either act or we're acted on. So we can literally increase our proactive muscles by working on them and being conscious in our development of this habit that we're going to be proactive and not reactive, because it does take some effort. If we're people who have always been reactive people a lot of our lives, it takes a lot of effort to suddenly become proactive people, and yet it can change everything. In his book, Dr. Covey says, once you become proactive, it changes your effectiveness not by 50%, not by 100%. He claims that it will increase your effectiveness by 5,000%. And I was thinking, again, I think in that first class, I did a little PowerPoint, and I doubt I'm going to have time today to show it again. I was thinking about going through it again, but I gave an example of a young man who was disabled, mentally disabled. He, low IQ, kind of like I talked about my nephew being low IQ. This young man was low IQ, and so the only job he could hold down was being a bagger at a grocery store. A bagger is somebody who puts the groceries in the bag. And so to expedite it in some supermarkets, I don't know if they're, I don't think I haven't seen any here, but in some supermarkets in America, They have the cashier, and they have a bagger next to her bagging the groceries for you. And that's what his job. And that was pretty much his limit for his job, was to be a bagger because of his mental disability. But in just real short, without going to the slideshow, somebody came into the store and challenged everybody to be proactive, in essence, and to try to help their customers have a positive experience. And that by doing that, their whole company would be more successful. If they greeted their customers in a friendly way, if they did things to make them feel special, whatever they could do to make a good experience for their customers would help the entire organization. Most of the people listened to that presentation and did nothing, essentially nothing. But this bagger decided, he said, I could do something. And so he went home and he started looking up nice sayings, like how to enjoy life better and be happy, those sorts of sayings you find on the internet. So he'd look on the internet for these nice sayings that he could print up, and his dad would help him. He wasn't very computer literate, so his dad would help him print them out, and then he would on the back he would write down "Have a nice day" and sign his name on it, and that's all he could do. And so when he was bagging, he would cut these all up and he'd put it into the bag, and then he would say personally, to the people, "Have a nice day," and they'd walk off with the bags. Well, he called up this consultant and told her this is what he was doing, and she was impressed that he was the one person who seemed to take her talk seriously. But then pretty soon she got a call from the manager. And the manager said, "Something odd is happening here. We have people lining up at the cashier where Johnny is the bagger. The other day I tried to get people to leave that line and go to another line, and they won't leave his line. They said, we used to come, only once a week, but now we're coming, a couple of times a week because we want Johnny's sayings, we want his greetings." And so suddenly their entire grocery store kind of caught on to this idea. And so people in there was a flour section of the grocery store. And so when they had a broken flower or something, they would trim it up again, and they couldn't sell it, but they'd go out and pin it on a little old lady or give it to a little child or something. And everybody started doing what Johnny was doing. They saw what kind of reaction that Johnny had gotten, and so the whole store started actually doing what this consultant had asked them to do to start with, that nobody did except Johnny. And the entire store changed. People started not only coming repeatedly to the store, but they'd bring their friends and they'd talk about Johnny. And he changed the destiny of this grocery store. Johnny, who could just barely write his name. Johnny, who, like my nephew, probably a 70 IQ. Johnny, who will never be anything more than a bagger, but Johnny, who cared to make a difference, to be proactive. That's made him, who was most effective in that store? The manager with a 120 IQ, 130 IQ, or Johnny with a 70 IQ? In that case, it was Johnny. So Covey is saying that basically being proactive can make the difference between Johnny and all the smarter people in that company, because Johnny chose to be proactive. So we can work at this. It's more than positive thinking, because it's positive problem solving. So it's not just being happy when you have a bad boss. It's being, yes, keeping your attitude straight, true. Probably there's some positive attitude involved with it. But much more important is you become a problem solver. You take responsibility, like Johnny did, to be the problem solver. And suddenly your IQ isn't the important part. It's that you're trying to make things positive. So you use your creativity, you use your resourcefulness to be that problem solver. You can tell the language between somebody who's reactive and somebody proactive. The reactive, there's nothing I can do. That's just the way I am. Oh, I see. We are projecting that. But now you see what I'm projecting. I didn't take note here. Anyways, that's what I'm seeing, by the way. And what you'll see when you're presenting is the current slide, the next slide, and the video. I put it underneath it, but you could put the video on top of the next slide if you wanted to. But anyway, I think I won't stop it at this point. I could turn it back the way it should be, but I think you can read it okay. So anyway, they he makes me so mad. She does this, he does that. Critical, gossiping, all that sort of stuff. Whereas, the proactive person, let's look at alternatives. I can choose a different approach. I can control my feelings. Take just be, yes, positive, but also convinced that you can make a difference. This one's probably hard for you to see, but again, I put it in there. Basically, it's a reflection of that last slide, but it has some more details to it. Some of the things that you might hear from a reactive person, that's me, that's just the way I am. There's nothing I can do about it. That sort of stuff. It's only my wife. If only my wife were patient. If only my boss understood me. If only my teachers appreciated me. Whatever. It's always somebody else's fault. You can look at that in more detail later. Let's see what time it is. Well, this one, I think we can see this, look at this one real quick, I hope. Now, this is another person, but he's obviously learned a lot of what he's teaching from Covey.
Getting over failure and finding success begins with taking 100% responsibility for your life. You have to give up your excuses and victim stories. You have to drop all the reasons you can't succeed or haven't succeeded so far. I know it's a challenge, but if you want to get ahead, you have to take complete responsibility for everything you experience in your life. When we have setbacks, we get sidetracked with blame and excuses, and we give away the power of personal responsibility. You can change that. When something doesn't turn out, you can ask yourself, how did I create that situation? What did I say or not say? How did I get the other person to act that way? You may think you can't control other people's actions, and you're right. You can't. But we have a part in everything that happens. What if you hear that people have said something bad about you? Maybe it isn't even true. But you can think back and see your part in it. Maybe you've criticized them in the past without having all the information. Maybe they've heard you criticize others. Our actions affect people in ways we can never imagine. And finally, you want to ask yourself the real power question. What will I do differently next time to get the result I want? It's great to know what you did to contribute to your own difficulties, but it's pretty useless if you don't put that knowledge to work. Let it help you. Let it move you forward.
Well, Jack Canfield is actually a friend of, obviously he's teaching a Covey principle here. He's a friend of Covey's, and you may have known him, you may have seen books called Chicken Soup for the Soul, stuff like that. Jack Canfield's the co-author of that series of books, which has sold tens of millions of copies also. So, being both from the state of Utah and America and friends, he's basically teaching Covey principles here. So let's go back. And he did it like Covey would have. He did a good job, I think, of expressing what Covey would have expressed. That's not where I want to. I guess I'll go back there. So basically, even though you think you may have been in the right, that somebody else wronged you, the point that Canfield and Covey would make is that you may have first off, you may have had some responsibility you're not even aware of. It may have been extremely subtle, but you may have had some responsibility, and you should look first at yourself. But regardless, you still don't have to react badly. Did I do anything to, what was my role in my relationship with the German lady, my supervisor? I was doing my job extremely professionally. People really loved the way I was doing my job, and my publication, even though it was only published for the state of Washington, was being read all over the country because it was the only publication of its nature, and so federal officials were complimenting me on my work and so forth. So I was getting kind of proud of my work. I'm cool, and have this gal criticize me. Of course, obviously I had a role because I wrote the story that she was criticizing, and in that case, she was right. I came to believe that, but so I had to get some humility. Get a dose of humility to realize, yeah, maybe I'm not perfect. Maybe I made a mistake here. I wasted a lot of time doing it. We have what we call a circle of concern. That's all the things that concern us in life. They can be family things, they could be national things, they could be international things. So we have lots of concerns. And we have only a smaller area, typically, of influence. But by being proactive, we can stretch that area of influence, like Johnny, like the other guy who became the interface between the executive and the employees. We can stretch our circle of influence little by little, stretch it bigger and bigger. But we also, by the way, can let it shrink. If we are not proactive, our circle of influence can shrink and shrink and shrink. If we're one of the people who just complain and don't do anything, then our circle of influence typically shrinks because now we're just talk. People know we're just talk. We're not doers, we're talkers. And fewer people will trust us to actually make a difference. So if they know that we're the type of person that will make a difference, that will make things better, who will find solutions, our circle of influence increases. If we're just talkers, it decreases. So if we want to be effective, we have to gradually, and we can gradually expect this to grow and grow and grow. I think I mentioned that last week when I first arrived at my previous assignment in Kazakhstan. I volunteered to be part of the organizing committee for the KEMEP, that was the name of the university, the KEMEP International Research Conference. It had been run for 15 years by the School of Business, and I was in the College of Social Sciences, so I was not in the same organizational unit. But they went ahead and accepted volunteers from any units, and so I went and volunteered. I thought it was an important part of the university, was an international research conference. So I went and volunteered, and as they would ask for help doing different things, I had certain skills that I could help with. I'm a publisher, an editor. I can help with brochures or whatever, stuff like that, writing letters. Because I have those certain skills. Later on, not that year, but later on, I developed a database for them to start keeping track of people who showed interest in the conference, so that we could contact them again and keep them updated, because they had I mentioned before, they had no institutional memory, and so they were not successfully tracking people that showed interest and so I changed that later on. But anyway, I used the skills I had to try to improve things. But that first year, even though I hadn't really had a chance to do very much, I didn't think, but nonetheless, I volunteered and I would do my job. If I volunteered to do something, I'd make sure I did it. If I had to stay up all night, I would do it. And so the dean of the business college and the chairman of the conference, both over the period of several months, began trusting me. And I wasn't even really kind of conscious, but it kind of hit me in that last meeting before the conference that they came to the last organizing committee meeting about, I don't know, 4 or 5 days before the conference, and they said there's 7 things we have to have done immediately before the conference. And as they went down their list of 7 things, and there was a group of 12 or 15 people, most of whom were part of their business college, and I was from the social science college. Of those 7 things they needed done, they asked me to do 4 of them. So I did 4, and the other 12 people did 3 together. And so that kind of, I couldn't help but kind of chuckle about that, but I did that too. And then the morning of the conference, I get a phone call. In fact, I got 2 phone calls, one from the dean of the business college and one from the chair of the conference. And they both had the same message. Ken, we need you to be the what's the right word for it? We need you to run the main program here. We have a hall there at KeyMep that fits 500 people, and so we need you to take control of this meeting and to run the meeting. And like I say, this was just an hour or something before it was supposed to begin, and I said, "Why me?" And when I talked to the dean, I said, "You're the dean. You're the dean of the College of Business. You should be doing it." He said, "No, we need you to do it." And so then I said, "Okay, I guess I will." But they apparently didn't talk to each other, because then I got the call from the chairman of the conference. He said, "Ken, you've got to run this meeting." And okay. I already told the dean I would. So, and then when it was done, and I'm not all that good of a MC, master of ceremonies, or whatever you want to call that. I'm not a natural, off the cuff talker, but I did it. But nonetheless, at the end, they decided to have a group picture. And so they had everybody come out to the outside, and then there were some steps going down from this large hall, what they call the Great Hall. And so we lined up for a picture, and people started shouting, "Ken, you need to come up here to the front. You're running this thing. You're in charge. You come down the front." And I said, "I'm not in charge of anything. I don't have any position. I just did stuff." And so that's kind of a demonstration also. Just somebody just doing stuff, just being a problem solver, gets you pushed up to the front, even when that was not at all your intention. And I was totally taken by surprise that it even happened, because that was not at all my intent. I am a proactive person. I do look at solutions all the time. I love brainstorming in my mind, even if it's not my responsibility. That experience of brainstorming solutions of things is something that I have learned to love to do. And so I guess I did it naturally, but I had no idea there would be that sort of response. And then 2 years later, they called me up and said, "Ken, we want you to be in charge of the whole thing." And it was the first time they'd ever asked anybody not in the School of Business to be the chairman of the International Research Conference that they had created. And so I did it for 2 years, and we did a good job. But anyway, it doesn't take a lot. I sometimes use the analogy, sometimes if you start off with putting the chairs away, you have a room where you have to put chairs away. If you stay and put the chairs away, that's a signal that you can be counted on, that you're willing to do some of the grunt work. And it may start there. Maybe it's something extremely simple that you do that nobody else will do. And people will start counting on you to do more and do more and do more and do more, until it's crazy. A American Peace Corps worker came to the university and wanted to find somebody to help her start a conference to help NGOs, non-government organizations. and to help author a book, help publish a book. And since I'm a publisher, somebody pointed her to me. So she gave me her idea of wanting to help NGOs to tell their story better and so forth. And so she was being a Peace Corps worker. She was actually almost ready to go home. She had almost finished her tour of duty, and so she just wanted to do it once. And I said, no. If we're going to do this, we're not going to do it once. We're going to set it up so we can do it forever. This is a good idea. If NGOs need this, then let's set it up so it can go on perpetually. And so she agreed to that, and so we found some other support, and that first year we only had a like $10,000 or $15,000 grant or something to run this thing with and to publish the book. And then next year we got some more money from somebody else, the next year some more, and by the fourth year we got a $4 million grant from USAID. And now they're in their second $4 million grant, the NGO I brought in to kind of manage it. So again, that was one of those things where here's a problem. Peace Corps workers saw a problem. They need to tell their story better. Even the donors, the big donor organizations like Soros and people like that are not paying attention to the people on the front lines. We need to help them tell their story better. I said yes. We set up a conference, and now it's in its 8th year. We published 6 or 7 books, best practices. They've got like I say, they're in their second $4 million contract. And this time it's to build an online education system for NGO people. And so I'm kind of thinking about trying to replicate it here in Malaysia, maybe see what possibilities there are for doing it here. But it doesn't necessarily it really hasn't taken that much of my effort. It just takes some creativity and some commitment to let's see what we can do to make the world a better place. What problems can we solve? And it kind of takes off. That 5,000% difference, I look at that when I first read that, does it really make a 5,000% difference? I kind of think it does. I really do believe it does. And the difference is just being proactive, not being a genius. It's just being proactive, that I can make a difference and do it. And there are some things that you don't have direct control over. There are some things you do have direct control over, and some things you have indirect, that you can influence indirectly. But the things you can't control, you can't control. But you might be surprised that there's probably more things you can at least have indirect control over, at least indirect influence on. I think influence may be the better word, than you even imagine. I did not imagine when that Peace Corps worker came to me about the idea of publishing a book and having a small conference, that it would be a multi-million-dollar project. I did not imagine that. I could not control that, but by taking one step after another, it became that. Just continue to be proactive and look for solutions, and it happened. People started coming to me. Another major donor came to me and said, "Hey, we want you to set up the National NGO Center here in Kazakhstan. We'll give you $80,000 a year to set it up, and we'll build a board of advisors made up of Soros and Eurasia and all these top donors, and we'll make you the center of the NGO world in Kazakhstan." As it turned out, my university turned it down. They're idiots. That I couldn't control. They're idiots. And so, yeah, it's frustrating to be handed that opportunity that would have made KEMEP the manager of those $8 or $9 million worth of grants. We would have controlled those grants instead of my partner in NGO. I would have more direct influence over it, but I couldn't control, despite all my best arguments and evidences, the university turned it down. So, we're still accomplishing it. I had to find another NGO to manage the other grants, and they've taken off, and they have been very successful doing it. But it could have been the universities, and they didn't have that insight. They didn't have that understanding. They didn't understand how this could be a positive thing for the university. So that's something I could not control. There are things like that. They're frustrating. I've had those also. Being a proactive person means you're going to be frustrated sometimes because you're being proactive and other people are not being proactive. They're being reactive. And the vice president at that university thought, that's not very, 80,000 isn't very much. It's not worth our time. And I said, wait a second, that's just your foot in the door money. That's the subsidy to get things started. Then you'll get millions off of this. I was right, and she was wrong. But didn't change it. She would not accept that grant. I did what I could. I couldn't do everything. So some things you don't control. Some things you're going to be frustrated about. A proactive person is guaranteed to be frustrated about some things because not everybody is proactive in this world, and some people, you can present them the best idea in the world, and they don't get it. They're kind of like, oh, we don't do that sort of stuff. We've never done that before. That's a lot of hassle. Whatever. There are probably major media companies who had people down below saying, gee, we ought to do something like, and they described Facebook. But Facebook hadn't been created yet. And they didn't know, their managers didn't know what Facebook could be. So probably somebody in theory created it before Facebook. But the executives over him didn't get it. They didn't understand it. And they didn't pursue it. So somebody proactive can run into a lot of walls. I guarantee it. I know it. I experience it. So anyway, you need to just deal with the problems. And sometimes you just smile. That's really all you can do. So in some cases that you don't control things, you just can't let them stop you. You have to keep going. You can't react like that. You can't just freak out. You can't just postpone and procrastinate and be ineffective because you aren't getting everything your way, or you need to be more like, this guy. That when he was being pushed to be an agitator, he instead was out talking to the farm workers and becoming friends with the masses of people. He was being criticized by the other leaders of India as not being proactive enough, they thought. They thought that he should be out there, marching on the government and telling the Britons to get out and all this sort of stuff. Instead, he was out walking the country, getting to know the people, becoming famous among the people as somebody who cared more about them than he cared about power. He wasn't after power. He was after solutions. And so he gained influence in such a way that he could bring the British Empire to its knees by just saying, we decided not to come to work. Have a nice day. We're all taking vacations, and so forth. Being, peaceful, but not cooperating with the British until they realize we're better off having a cooperative India than one that refuses to cooperate with us. So he won the battle with a very peaceful approach, which others like Martin Luther King has accomplished. And in great contrast with some of the other people in the civil rights movement in America, Martin Luther King was able to do something similar following Gandhi's, his example. So we can expand and expand our influence as we flex our muscles and become better at being proactive. We obviously have to go beyond planning and promises. We have to work hard at keeping promises and commitments to reach the goals. As I said, it's a matter of trust. People have to know that you're somebody who will do what you say you'll do. And then once you have their trust, then you'll get their cooperation. Not always. Like I say, not always. Sometimes they won't get it. They will be reactive people, and they will just want just leave things like they are. Don't be such a rabble rouser. Don't always look for change. We just like things the way the way it is, and they won't cooperate out of laziness, out of foresight, whatever it is. They won't cooperate, and they'll be frustrating. But as people start seeing what you can do by keeping your promises and commitments, not just talking, not just planning, not just promising, but actually doing, then more and more people will become supportive of what you're trying to accomplish. And with that, your circle of influence will grow and grow and grow. In fact, he suggests in some cases, and I can see this, I have some examples in my life also where your circle of influence can actually exceed your circle of concern, where actually people start coming to you for your help for things that you're really not concerned about because they see you as a problem solver. And so suddenly your influence exceeds your area of concern, which is kind of odd. It's kind of odd, but I've experienced some of that too. So it's if you are proactive, your influence can grow greatly. I think we're out of time, but I think maybe I'm going to try to end with this. If we can. Looks to be that I'm on that same one. Let's see if we can. No. If you need to go, you can, but I'm going to go ahead and play this 2-minute video here for those that want to watch it. Will Smith, this is kind of interesting to me because he basically is saying sometimes it's good to be a little bit delusional, to think you can change things and do things you can't do maybe. But it's okay to be a little bit delusional. So I found it an interesting video. So let me run this real quick for those that want to watch it. There it goes. Anyway, like I said, it's very short, but it's kind of interesting. Like I say, he actually, as I said, kind of says, at a certain point, you just believe you can do anything. And of all people, I think Will Smith in his industry has done pretty much everything. So, as I said, being a little delusional might be a good thing if we can get it to come up. Hello, come up. Our system's slowing down here. Must be ready to go to lunch. And hopefully everybody had a chance to sign up for a presentation. And if you have any questions, I'll linger here for a while to answer any questions. Come on, you can do it.
Honestly, as I can say to you, I truly believe that I could be the president if I wanted to. I think that there's a certain delusional quality that all successful people have to have. You have to believe that something different than what has happened for the last 50 million years of history. You have to believe that something different can happen. I'm motivated by fear. Fear of what? And fear of fear. I hate being scared to do something. And I think what developed in my early days was the attitude that I started attacking things that I was scared of. Greatness is not this wonderful, esoteric, elusive, God-like feature that only the special ones will ever chase. It's something that truly exists in all of us. Same with Ali, same with Nelson Mandela. It's very simple. This is what I believe, and I'm willing to die for it. Period.
I think that's the point, is do you really want to make a difference? It's not just for yourself, it's not just for your own life, but I think the real challenge is, do you want to make a difference in the world? And that's where being proactive, it really comes into full effect. I want to make a difference. I'll do what's necessary to make a difference, to leave the world a better place. And that can make a difference in your family, it can make a difference in your job, it can make a difference in society, whatever it is that you decide that you want to make a difference in. But it all starts with the determination, I can make a difference. I can be proactive, I can make a difference. And it may be that you can only see a small place where you can make a difference. Just a small little center of influence in which you can make a difference. But that's what Covey's saying, is you can start with that small place and make it bigger and make it bigger and make it bigger. If people trust you to be a proactive person, somebody who really wants to make a difference and will do what's necessary to make a difference, your center of influence will grow and grow. Anyway, thank you. If you have any questions or anything, I'll linger and help any way I can. Thank you.